I'm dropping out of college. Again. Hey, my name is Mai. I'm 23 years old and I tried college twice and it didn't work out. I want to start this video off by saying that this is my personal experience and I'm not trying to tell people to drop out of school. I am just explaining my own personal experience. This is just what I went through and why I left personally. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, just for some background, I graduated high school in 2020 during the global pandemic, so I didn't really get a graduation. It was more like a video slideshow with my name on it that I watched with my family in the living room. Anyway, I was an honors student and I did really well in my classes and I even enjoyed my classes. You know, I liked school. As far as the career path I wanted to take, sometime during my freshman year of high school, I decided that everyone was right and I was going to regret pursuing a career as a performer in music and it wasn't going to work out, blah, 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 whatever. So I decided to pursue fashion. I thought less people would look down on me and there would be better job opportunities and it was more stable and I loved fashion. So it seemed like a win-win-win. I don't know, I was 15. So from my sophomore year, I started working towards this goal of pursuing fashion as a career. I went to one of those things where like people from colleges and like their admissions office come to your high school and like give you a talk about the school. I went to one of those and I ended up discovering a fashion school that I really liked and I decided it was going to be my dream college and where I really wanted to go. I'm also not going to say the names of these colleges for privacy or something like that, or not making them mad if I am talking about why I left their school. But anyway, I started doing everything I could to get into the school. I formed a fashion club in their name. I started styling my friends and taking photos, adding them to a portfolio to show this is something that I really wanted to pursue. And then when college application season came around, I only applied to this school and like one other school. But I really only cared about this one school. And I got in. Shout out my best friend Ophi for helping me with my personal essay. And shout out to Past Me for adding my bullet journal to my portfolio because they really liked that for some reason. Anyway, I got in and I was finally going to go to my dream school. I don't think that fashion school was ever going to be the right path for me. Ever since I was little, I was always performing and I was always very passionate about it. I started writing songs in middle school and to this day I still do that as a form of expression and therapy. I remember very distinctly during the online orientation for school that whoever was guiding us was telling us that our entire life was going to be dedicated to the school. Hours of classes and hours of homework and the internships you would get from this school and the connections you would make. All of your friends are going to be from this school. And I just remember that my heart sank. I was terrified. I was scared of my entire life revolving around fashion school. So instead of being excited for something I had worked so hard towards years of my life in high school, I was confused and anxious. I think deep down my heart just knew that this truly was not what I wanted. I couldn't really place a finger on it at the time, but I did know that I had more ambitions and hobbies that I wanted to do. I also just turned 18. Freshly an adult, ready to explore the world, see what it has to offer, and I guess my vision for that just didn't really align with how orientation panned out the next 4 years. But I didn't decide to drop out on a gut feeling. I definitely decided to just stick it out and for my first quarter, see if anything would change. I figured that I was just nervous from all the change happening in life. I was also moving out of my childhood home. But as I continued school, I realized that I just felt so out of place, and I didn't think the environment was beneficial for my growth or my happiness. So when I started attending school, we had hybrid classes. I was able to go in to class and actually meet some of the people. However, it felt like a lot of people in my cohort were kind of focused on the wrong thing or were in it for the wrong thing. It kind of seemed like a lot of them wanted to become influencers rather than like someone actually doing stuff in the industry. And you know, I could just be projecting my own opinions about influencer culture that I'm not going to get into because I have enough to say about that for a different video. But I also think it was really difficult to make connections to my peers when there was just such a huge disconnect. I was asked to join a hype house. People moved from out of state into high-rise apartments on top of attending this school that cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. And then they wanted to form a hype house. They told me their plan to rent out a mansion that they said was affordable over a meal at Denny's that I could barely afford after paying rent for a 2-bedroom apartment that I shared with 3 other girls. And I get that, like, technically it's possible to get through school and earn your degree without making friends with these people. But also it's kind of not. I mean, at least not for me, or not when you're going into an industry where connections are so important. And I didn't know it at the time, but I really value community, and I was not finding community with rich white kids. And this isn't to say that like everyone at that school was horrible. You know, I wasn't there for a long time. I was there for 10 weeks. And who's to say that I wouldn't have found more people like me or that I connected to. But I will say that one of my past roommates, who I ended up really getting along to and that I'm still friends with to this day and connected with, also ended up dropping out of that school. So who's to say? And beyond the lack of community, there was a lack of fulfilling classes. Now, my last class before attending this school was Algebra 2. But with the math class that they provided at this school, my last course might as well have been elementary school. And I'm not exaggerating, because I remember that one of the assignments was telling us to write numbers out as words. And I'm talking turn 2025 into 2025 with the dash and everything. And it's not like it's a STEM school, but elementary level? And also, how did the creative classes hold up? I would say that my favorite class was probably my beginning drawing class, where we got to draw furniture and color. And they gave us really nice equipment, and it was Prismacolor markers and color pencils, and I still use them. So it was really good. I also think that was the only class that I remember enjoying and learning things. All of my classes that I took were required for my specific major. I feel like in these courses, I could have just learned this from like a YouTube video or like multiple YouTube videos over the 10 weeks that we had. Why am I paying so much money for what is a glorified Adobe Illustrator tutorial? Look, here's an in-depth YouTube tutorial that I found in seconds that existed during the time that I went to the school. If you're making students pay as much money as you are, you should probably provide something worth paying for, 1, and 2, that they can't find for free somewhere else. Also, the professor just hated me. She gave me a 0 on an assignment that is impossible to get a 0 on, so perhaps I just have a particular grudge on that class. Anyway, to be completely honest, I don't really remember the rest of the classes I was in. I do remember that I was really unhappy at the time, and it was probably the lowest my mental health has ever been. Around the time that I was deciding to drop out was like the worst. Like, there was stuff happening outside of school, and then the school that I was supposed to be excited for because this was my dream college and, you know, I was excited for the future, made me super unhappy. And it could be the case that I just chose the wrong school, because I've heard that other fashion schools are much better. I just heard it through the grapevine.
Oh no, who told you that? Just the grapevine.
But at the end of the day, I am grateful that it didn't work out, and I saved my parents from paying tens of thousands of dollars, which was the case even after the $11,000 that I would get in scholarships. I don't think that school was academically challenging at all, which is something that I realized that I need. Probably because I went to one of, if not the most academically challenging high school in the area that I live. Going from a school where everyone is competing to be like the best to writing numbers as words was very jarring. So I dropped out. After I dropped out of school, I was still living in an apartment and I had to pay rent, so I started working full-time. I ended up moving out of my first apartment, but I realized that I really loved where I lived, so I found a new roommate, which I had mentioned before, and I moved into a new apartment because I really liked where I lived. Because I was living there, I continued to work full-time. I wasn't planning on going back to school at the time. Outside of work, I would write music and play video games on stream, which I'm gonna try and get back into. I was navigating my last year's as a teenager while living paycheck to paycheck. And while it was a challenging experience, I don't think I would trade it for anything. I really recognize the privilege that I had being able to do that and being able to experience that, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without my parents' support, so I'm really grateful and so lucky for the 2 years that I spent living away from home. Those years were so necessary for my growth and becoming who I am now. I definitely would do it all over again. But I was living paycheck to paycheck, and my roommate moved to another state to study at a different school. And this meant that I wouldn't be able to afford renewing my lease. I also just didn't want to go through the trouble of finding a new roommate, and I was scared that I wasn't gonna like them as much as I liked my past roommates, so it kind of just felt like the time was right to go back home. I stayed at the job that I had for a few months after returning home, but the gas for my commute and the parking that I had to pay was just not sustainable, so I quit. Living at home, not attending school, and being unemployed meant that I had a lot of free time on my hands. This also meant I had no sense of structure, so I felt very depressed. But I had my friends, and my friends went to a community college, and they encouraged me to attend and audition for the musical. I didn't get into the musical, but I did start attending community college in hopes to find myself or something. There I was, 21 years old, getting a fresh start. I think community college is kind of awesome because you can literally take any course you want for the most part, and that's exactly what I did. For my first semester, I was in 3 classes. I was in electronic music, ceramics, and biology. All of these I did for fun, and I also did some extracurriculars like a play, and I joined a club where we got to put on a concert and I got to perform my original songs for the first time. Since I didn't have a major, I didn't feel pressured to take any classes I didn't want to take. I was able to just take classes that interested me, and I really enjoyed it. There was no pressure. I didn't feel like I was being forced onto a specific path. And I was also able to meet a lot more people that kind of had more interests aligned with mine, since I was joining classes based on my interests. I think at this school I felt a lot closer to community than I did at my first. And even one of my best friends is someone that I met at this school. Going back to school helped me regain a sense of structure that I was definitely lacking and I very much needed. So, what happened? So my second semester, I decided to major in music. I was a music major with a focus in vocal performance. This meant more classes, and in order to get your classes paid for, you had to become a full-time student. And in order to become a full-time student, you need like 12 units. And for some reason, music classes are worth so little units. One of my classes was half a credit. But I didn't really have a problem with becoming a full-time student. I was getting more out of my commute, and I was in classes that were necessary into understanding the fundamentals of music, which if you're trying to be a musician is very important. I think that there are, though, undeniable pros and cons of studying art at a community college. Being a full-time student meant I got to use the resources that the department provided, like practice rooms and equipment. I also got one-on-one lessons with a professor that I really liked, so I was getting a pretty good deal. It just felt very limiting. It just feels like there's a limit to how much faculty could really pour into the program. And I felt like I could only grow so much in this space, which, don't get me wrong, I think that one of the reasons for going to community college is to use it as a stepping stone. And I'm not expecting a prestigious program like an Ivy League or like Juilliard, especially considering how much schools love to fund the arts. But I don't think these are reason enough to take away from the experience. If this is supposed to prepare us for a university, then shouldn't students be faced with challenge and growth? I think my main gripe is that accessible education should not be as limiting as it is. Quality education should be accessible to all. But that is a whole other thing I could go off on in another video. And this isn't to say that the music program was horrible. It was just limited. I do think there are great professors who want to see the students in the program grow. Therefore, they provide challenging experiences that are necessary for that. But on the other hand, it also feels like there is an expectation for faculty to be lenient at community college. And when they meet that expectation, they start to rely on students a bit too much. And don't get me wrong, student assistance is useful, but when you're relying on them to make the program better rather than doing it yourself, I don't think it's very beneficial. You're the one getting paid to run this thing. I also think that lenience bleeds into constructive criticism. Maybe this is a hot take, but as a professor, it's your responsibility to teach your students and help them improve their skills. That's like the whole point of the class. I don't think it's helpful to lie to people about where they're at. And I'm not saying to be mean to students who can't hold a note or don't know the circle of fifths or just lack some sort of skill. I'm just saying you can be honest about how they can improve. And regardless of whether or not these students are music majors or even want to pursue a career in the music industry, they're in the class. And it is quite literally your job to give constructive criticism. You can give someone positive comments while also telling them how to improve. When I took ceramics, I wasn't expecting to go into a career for pottery, and neither were my classmates. A lot of us were in it for fun, but my teachers still helped us learn how to do it, improve our skills, told us what we were doing wrong and how to fix it. And that's the point of taking the class. I'm not in it for a glaze fest, although for pottery, I guess it is sort of a glaze fest. Anyway, the extracurricular where we made a concert happen and I got to play original music ended up becoming a class. We put on a show that people pay to see, so obviously we want quality. I don't think it's helpful to tell people that they sound great and not give them any other notes when it's clear that there are things that they need to work on. Gives people this impression that they're better than they are, and it starts to fall on to the more skilled people in the class to carry the quality of the show. They have to do everything they can to make everything sound better. And instead of pushing students, this drags them down. The whole point of the class is that anyone of any skill level can join, which is great. It's a learning experience in not just music, but also the responsibilities and jobs that it takes to create and put together a concert. I think it's a really great concept. But I also think that allowing students to make decisions that they're not ready for causes and creates a lot of problems. People were trying to play songs with instruments they haven't touched in years, and with the right amount of time and dedication, I do think it's possible. But we definitely did not have enough time. We had less than a semester and everyone was learning 8 songs. I was playing guitar and some songs I didn't even have down until maybe the day of the concert. And students are also in other classes or have jobs and are just doing stuff outside of school. And while it's amazing that we could pull off a concert in so little time, I don't really think it was of excellence. And maybe you're thinking, well, at least it was fun. Which yeah, sure. But what's the point of paying for a class when you're not really learning and growing from it? But I digress. I clearly think there are more cons than pros. I almost forgot that was the whole point of what I was saying. I didn't really start to see these cons until my 3rd semester when I dropped almost all of my classes. The only class I was in my 3rd semester was pop music ensemble, which is probably why a lot of my complaints come from that class. But you're also probably wondering why I dropped all of my classes if I didn't see the cons until my 3rd semester. The summer after my 2nd semester was really horrible. Well, actually, the first half was amazing. I had an awesome birthday party and I went to Anime Expo with my friends. Also, me and my now girlfriend became exclusive. But the second half was probably one of the worst summers of my life. Little content warning here. I'm going to be talking about car crashes. Might show a little picture or two. Nothing graphic, just damage of the car. If you don't want to hear about that, skip to this timestamp on the screen. So I got into my very first car crash. My beloved car, Blueberry, was totaled. I broke my wrist. I was devastated. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but it was really scary. And it still affects my driving anxiety to this day. Then, not even a month later, my parents, my aunt and uncle, and my grandma got into a separate car crash that was so bad it was on the news. They were on their way to another relative's funeral when a driver under the influence crashed right into them. My relatives were hospitalized, and my grandma, we ended up losing to her injuries. Luckily, everyone else survived, but their injuries were severe. Some of them are still recovering to this day. So never drive under the influence. It's never worth it. Give the keys to someone else or call an Uber, or you're an asshole. Before this crash, my grandma was really healthy for her age. She was super lively. She would walk for miles. So for her life to be taken away so quickly was not only heartbreaking, but it also made me so much more aware of my own mortality, as if me getting into my own car crash wasn't enough. And the sequence of events just really scared me, because I knew that things could change in the blink of an eye, and life could be so short, and anything could happen. I became really impatient, and I didn't want to keep waiting to get to where I wanted to be or play, the long game. If I see other people doing it, if I know that it's possible to just take a leap of faith and follow my dreams, then I want to do it. I want to take that risk instead of feeling like I'm wasting time doing things that make me unhappy. And I know that going through unhappy phases in your life is inevitable, but if I can choose between being in school for the next 4 years of my life, studying, trying to get a degree that I don't really care about, or dropping all of that to create music, videos, crafts, all at a pace where I'm less likely to get burnt out and all on my own terms, then I know which one I'm choosing. And the bottom line is, I was unhappy in school for a lot of reasons. This community college that I went to was located in a very white area. A lot of the people I was surrounded by at school were white. And this wasn't to say that I couldn't be friends with these people or make any sort of connection, but a lot of my relationships with my peers would hit a wall because I just couldn't relate to them or feel like I was part of the community as a queer woman of color. I did have friends at this school that were gay or brown or both, but a lot of them transferred after my first year, or our schedules just stopped lining up and I didn't get to see them as much. So a lot of people that I talked to on a regular basis were people who have never had to face discrimination based on their identity being cis or straight, white, or all of the above. And you're probably like, oh, well, that doesn't mean you can't be friends with them. And that's true, but because of their lack of understanding, it made it really hard. The area I live in and grew up in is very diverse. So when I started attending this school, it was kind of a culture shock. Too many people were comfortable making offensive comments about race or gender or really any marginalized community. And while some people could recognize the wrongdoings, they never really did anything to hold anyone else accountable because at the end of the day, it wasn't affecting them. For example, one of my classmates made a joke about doing blackface for a performance. And when I brought up my concerns about how that comment was not only really offensive and inappropriate, but it also creates an unsafe space for students of color, it was me that received backlash instead of that student, the one being racist. There seemed to be more concern about his career and what would happen to it if word got out about his comment, instead of holding him accountable. And he was also still able to perform. He did not do blackface, but it doesn't make sense how you can allow someone to perform when they say something like that. And this was also a very isolating experience. I, for some reason, was ostracized and I lost friends, which really didn't make sense to me at all. And it was really disheartening. Someone I considered a close friend actually was so hell-bent on defending this guy's career and also tried to lie to other people about what happened. So if you're watching this, fuck you. And it was because of this situation that I actually stopped attending school before the semester ended. And while that was a huge part of my unhappiness at school, I was also just uninspired, and I felt discouraged as an artist and a musician. Every day I was met with people whose parents owned a home studio, or they could afford multiple instruments, or they just had the resources. And this isn't to say they were cocky or untalented, but it just felt like because everything was so available to them that they were able to reach higher skills easily. And it's kind of a privilege to be able to practice your skills in music. I mean, instruments and equipment are not cheap. I could just tell that the way we perceived music and consumed music was just so different. And like I mentioned earlier, I have come to understand the value of community and how important it is to me as an artist and as a person. The music I make is so deeply tied with my identity. So when I'm working in an environment with people who just don't get it, it's harder to find the motivation and the passion dies down a bit. I've seen what it's like to show my art in spaces where I found community, and it has been so much more fulfilling, much more motivating, and inspiring as an artist. I just find the most fulfillment when people can empathize with your work. And it just felt like a lot of people in my program lack the connection between music and humanity, which I think is understandably disheartening, especially when so much music is rooted in community and sending a message. So because I was unhappy and scared of sudden death, I dropped out again. I think a lot of people's solution would have been to stick it out a little longer and transfer to a better school. Because again, I could have just been unlucky with my choice of school. But I don't want to do that. I don't think that path is for me. And while I understand the importance of learning skills in an institution, I don't think getting a degree would have satisfied me. I genuinely don't even really care about getting a bachelor's, even if it is helpful and gets me a leg up in the industry. Oh, but if you get a degree, you have, so many more opportunities. Like, what if you want to become a teacher? Well, what if I don't want to do that? I don't think it's bad to refuse to go on a path you don't want to take. I know myself very well. I've done so much reflecting on the choices that I've made to get to where I am today. And I can confidently say that I am willing to take risks and I have the drive to get what I want and to find success in a non-traditional way. I think there's a lot of stigma around people who don't finish school, but for me, it's not coming from a place of laziness or a place that hates learning. I have passion, I have drive, and I've always loved learning. I know I can succeed without graduating a 4-year college. I know what I want, and I'm just taking matters into my own hands to make it happen, and I don't think that's wrong. I don't think it's wrong to save my parents thousands of dollars by not going to a university I know I don't want to go to. I think what I'm doing is brave. I know I have to completely rely on myself to learn and improve my skills, but maybe this was the challenge and the push that I needed that I wasn't getting from these schools. And honestly, I am really lucky and privileged to be able to make this choice. There is not a day that goes by that I am not grateful for my parents' support. I am so insanely privileged that I can decide to be independent in my learning and have a chance to pursue happiness and fulfillment for my future. I cannot make it any more clear how aware I am of my privilege to have the option to drop out. And while I have my complaints about the education system in the US, like how the youth is expected to just know what they want to do as soon as they get out of high school, I mean, at that point, you have barely gotten a taste of the world of opportunity ahead of you. But regardless, I think college and university is awesome. Focusing your studies in what you're passionate about is awesome. Having an institution with structure and resources is super helpful. And I genuinely think that if I had better experiences with higher education, I probably would have stuck it out. But again, this is about my own personal experience and how that experience affects my actions today. And of course, one of the points in this video is that I'm an artist. There are ways to succeed as an artist without a degree. If you're trying to be a rocket scientist or a lawyer or a doctor, especially if you're a doctor, go to school. I'm not here to convince anyone that you should be dropping out of school. I think finishing a degree is admirable, and a lot of my closest friends are in pursuit of higher education, and I love that. This video is for myself and for me to talk about myself and my personal experiences. And I may not be planning on returning to school now, but that doesn't mean that I'm not planning on returning to school ever. I will always reserve the right to return back to school if that is something that I please in the future. It is never too late to go back to school. I do want to say all of this to tell myself and convince myself that it's okay and the path doesn't have to be conventional. I have been looked down on by my elders and my peers and probably some people watching this video, and that's okay. I don't care. I know what I want, and I'm gonna do what I have to do in order to fulfill that. Life is unexpected and crazy, and I want to live mine without regret. So, for now, this is what makes sense for me. I would really love to hear other people's thoughts, whether it's your own college experience. If you've also struggled to continue school, let me know down below in the comments. I do apologize if the angles have been super inconsistent. With my camera, I have been tweaking because my camera is kind of old. I've been having SD card issues. I have multiple that I have gone through. But I figured it out. We persevere, as we always do, and as I always will. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, support the channel, maybe follow me on my journey on whatever it is I decide to do. I think what I really want to do is just create things, especially music. I love music, and I have a bunch of covers and original music up on my page right now, so if you would like to go check that out, go ahead. Be sure to leave a like if you liked this video and maybe share it with some people that you think might like this video. This is my first time making a video essay sort of thing, so hopefully I did well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys follow your dreams. Thanks. Bye.